Salvador Dali said, "Have no fear of perfection, for you will never reach it." And yet, for many of us, although we might not admit that perfection is holding us back, we don't start things because we don't think we'll do it well enough, or we have an idea, but we don't feel we can do it justice. And that, my friends, is perfectionism. Now, I am someone who prides himself on doing a good job, and I can be very meticulous on things, and generally had the philosophy that if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly and be the best at it, not to be competitive, just for the pure joy of doing it well. And yet I have found that it can be much better to learn when and when not to adopt this philosophy, and that a crucial part of success is actually sometimes just getting lots of stuff done or having ideas and doing them kind of badly to work out how to get better at them quickly. And that can be a really crucial part to success. So, hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast. I am Sam Webster Harris, and I'm fascinated in diving into the psychology of self-improvement. Today, I'm going a bit rogue and introspecting on some of my own personal lessons that I've learned from maintaining a regular writing habit for over a year, and it started as a bit of a philosophical newsletter diving into creativity and mental models for success, and it's given me some really useful insights into the topic of idea generation, perfectionism, improving our skills, and maintaining healthy habits. And these are all highly relevant to the show, so I thought I'd share them with you to help inspire you and give you an idea of why you might want to try something similar, whether that's writing or podcasting or making films, art, it doesn't matter. Any creative endeavors, I think, have some lessons that can be learned from here. Right. Number one, have a why. As Simon Sinek says, start with why. He who has a why can work out any how. And for me personally, I was always very good at school. I had a maths and science scholarship and was good at arts and music and sports. And yet English and specifically writing, I sucked. My teachers had no idea why I was so bad at it. They just thought I was a bit stupid in that one specific area. And it turns out I have dyslexia and ADHD. And to be honest, a bit of a raging problem with perfectionism and too many ideas and an inability to make a choice of them. And for maths and physics, it's very easy to be correct. And if you're creative in maths and physics, then you can come up with ideas to be correct in other ways, and that's fine. But with writing, it's so subjective. And despite having a wild imagination, I'd have no idea what to do with it and how to work out what I was meant to be doing with all the different options that I was coming up with. And so I just didn't really write much and was pathetic. So as far as I was concerned, I just wanted to prove to myself that I'm not a complete idiot. And as they say, being able to write clearly shows that you can think clearly. And I just really was unable to filter through my thoughts and had too many of them. So I wanted to be able to be good at these things. And that was a pretty motivating why. So just for me, I just wanted to start writing about anything. It didn't really matter about the topic or the format. So I just chose a newsletter so that I could stay accountable and also be aware that I knew some of the people I was sending it to, which would just make me want to keep doing it more than if I was putting it on Medium somewhere where no one knew who I was, for example. And I do actually have lots of ideas for some specific concepts in writing that I might work on in the future, but I just wanted to learn what styles of writing I might even enjoy writing or might be good at first to get a sense of what would make sense from all the crazy levels of ideas that I have. And whether you want to be a writer, a podcaster, a musician, or a filmmaker, I would just start with anything and make it kind of small and something that you can just start doing now and minimize the faff to just do it. So you want to be a filmmaker, just start by making 10-second TikToks. You want to be a podcaster, just talk to someone or review a movie or just get into the habit of doing stuff. And that will make the whole process a lot easier to then give you the autonomy to sort of do it better. As Ali Abdul says in his How to YouTube, he says the start is to just start. The second part is to kind of get better and get good at it. And then the final part is to get smart and actually think about how the concept is going to grow and where you're going to really find a scalable niche for your creative work. But anyway, just work out why you want to start what you're doing and use that to motivate you to just do stuff and don't worry too much about doing it perfectly. Number two, share things publicly, and if possible, find a way to iterate on the work that you're doing. So as I said, I started writing because I wanted to get better at thinking, and it's a really wise way to facilitate your own self-expression and internal realization of the deeper thoughts that you kind of hold within you and ideas that happen as you walk through life. can really help you understand the full extent of ideas that you are having day to day, whilst forcing you to spend time in ironing out the reality within them. Because often when you'll have quick ideas, they'll seem really good, but there'll be like some giant gaps in like flaws of logic. And when you have the idea in your brain, it just kind of pretends that those gaps aren't there and that you're a genius. It's only when you write them on paper that you're like, actually, this is a crap idea. I'm just sort of saying something that doesn't make that much sense. I need to work out what I'm really thinking of how I get there. And you can then think more clearly because you actually say the correct things. But what's been interesting is that I've done my first iteration of writing for the newsletter. And then often I would then use the newsletter as a script for something that I'd put onto the podcast, but I would kind of iterate on it for the podcast. So usually like 1 or 2 weeks after I wrote the newsletter, I would then like come back to the script and edit it quite a lot. And nearly every time, the process has led to me heavily revising the actual content and realizing a deeper understanding of what I said in the first attempt. Partly, I think the act of having to speak it out loud really helps you interpret what you're trying to say, but also you can come up with more relevant examples or stories that tie the whole piece together in a better narrative. And also writing up like the episode description and coming up with a title is like another step that helps you sort of redefine what the whole piece was and think about why you wrote what you wrote. So one week I wrote an article that was called Treating Your Brain Like a Brain, because all of the treat your brain like a muscle analogies annoyed me. And you can level up your brain's abilities by leaning into enjoyment rather than stress. And that's okay. Whereas a muscle, you should be leaning into some stress to like stress it out and grow it. And when I sent it, I didn't feel that comfortable about sending it as a newsletter because I hadn't really fully worked out like the full extent of the idea inside me. But as only when I came back to it and put a few more thought cycles into it with some different angles where I worked out like what I'd written was really a piece of advice on how to increase your output, learn faster and avoid burnout. And those were all things that I'd sort of alluded to in the original writing, but just hadn't summarized as like the take home of what the piece was actually about. Or another example is that I wrote a short piece called You Aren't the Product of the 5 People That You Spend Time With. Again, trying to conflict against like the standard advice that you are like the 5 people you spend time with, because I just like conflicting with common advice that's out there. And for the podcast, I made it a much more emotional piece where I told a story about my best friend who is just nothing like me in terms of our work drive or any of our interests, yet he really understands and helps me as a person. And the energy he gives me in like just relaxing switch off mode is really a beneficial relationship, despite the fact that he's not like me in any terms of his attitude towards sort of success, money, exercise, health, drinking, habits, etc. And if you were following advice from achievement books and prioritizing your network, could leave you little time for the actual important relationships in your life that do genuinely improve your life. And that story, I think, really helped hold the piece together as a narrative that made it much more enjoyable to listen to and would have made it more enjoyable to read, but it wasn't in my first email. So the point is to just get something out there quickly, but then, if possible, still have potential to ruminate on it and make a second, better version. So perhaps if you're making videos, you can post a short video on TikTok and then work out like how to make a better version for Instagram, if Instagram is the place where you actually want to spend more time. Lesson 3, minimize any hurdles that you have to getting to your first draft. One of the things I really like about the newsletter is the flexibility to express myself without having to overthink about the packaging. So I'll have some ideas, and the title in the newsletter might just be something to do with the ideas within the email. And it kind of matches the labels in my mind of how I think about it. And it just lets me to kind of just write and just put something and send it. And yes, it would be better if I thought of a catchier email title, but it doesn't matter that much. Whereas for the podcast, I do need to spend more time coming up with a good title. If I was to be posting on Medium, I would need to come up with a very clickbaity title, etc. And there's just one step of the creative process that just is a hurdle that I don't enjoy and kind of blocks me from doing it. Whereas by removing that hurdle with the newsletter, I can just write, have ideas and send them. So it's much nicer and more effective and means that I actually do the things. So coming up with catchy titles might not be your problem, but there's usually like 1 or 2 steps of things that do become a bit annoying. If you're making videos, for example, you might want to make higher quality ones and use like Final Cut Pro to do it, but it takes an absolute age to use. Whereas just keeping like the videos short and sharp, so to the point where you can just do it all on your phone with like CapCut, makes it so much easier that you can just do it all in half an hour. And so just finding ways to make it a bit easier to just get like something small out there is like undeniably huge way of getting more stuff done. And then once you've actually finished something, applying another few set of thought cycles of how to make it better is a lot easier as a second job rather than trying to fit all of these jobs into one before you publish anything. Because then you're falling into kind of a bit more of the perfectionism trap where it's just more and more jobs before the final thing is there. And you kind of want to get something out there as quickly as possible without having all these hurdles and barriers. If you run a business, you'll know that people are the most important thing in the company. Every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for a small business owner, because it is. Now, you want to be certain that you have the best candidates and screening tools available for you, which is why I recommend LinkedIn Jobs. I found it so easy to use for my hiring, and it makes it faster to find the right people for your team. And it's free. Small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 for a reason. It's simple to set up your job, add screening questions so you're talking to the right people, and put the purple hiring frame on your profile, and you're ready to go. You don't need to waste so much time and money talking to the wrong people when you can use LinkedIn Jobs to find qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/growth. That's linkedin.com/growth, GROWTH, for the unfortunate people at spelling like myself. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And on the topic of thought cycles, number 4, think about thought cycles. So one article I'm actually working on at the moment is embracing thought cycles and how to get the best out of yourself, because work that you naturally enjoy or perhaps can't stop yourself applying some more brain power to is an ideal place to be. And one of my weaknesses is definitely overthinking, but reapplied in the right scenario, it's a real strength where I will just unwillingly add more and more thought cycles to something. When it's useful to be adding thought cycles to something, that's really cool. That's how you do work that doesn't feel like work. So for me, writing and podcasting or running around having adventures are like much more productive than necessarily being tied to a desk, answering emails and taking Zoom calls all day. Because I'm not blocked from doing the things I enjoy. My mind naturally just does more of the things that I need to be doing that are my job. And so it allows me to be creative and do a good job. And ultimately, like, I did have to work out that I'm like a maker and not really a manager. And a day applying more and more thought cycles to creating stuff feels just intuitively productive inside me. Whereas for me, a day where I like tell other people what to do or like have meetings talking about stuff or sending emails, like it doesn't register as actual work. It just stresses me out and doesn't really satiate the beast inside me to just put thought cycles into creating stuff. And so finding the places where like your brain just sort of naturally does more of the work rather than you having to fight your brain and tell it to do the work is very cool. Now, before I over-romanticize, this can also not go perfectly in that if you give yourself too much time to be creative, you'll find that you don't have any more ideas than you had like before when you were busy all the time. And certainly anything that you enjoy will still require some balance, and you will still find blocks come up and times when you just don't feel like adding thought cycles. And certainly if you're tired or you're hungover, like it's actually really difficult, whereas you can just sort of turn up to work in a normal day and just like have your hours in and stuff gets done. So don't immediately quit your job or something just to be a creator. Just as I've already said, find something small that you can commit to regularly just to sort of have some output. And on that topic, number 5, small steps taken repeatedly add up to a very big journey. Now, at some point, I would like to write a book. And they say that to write a book, your hardest task is to just finish writing a bad draft. And then once you've done that, like you can have an editor talk to you about the whole thing and help you reshape it into something that becomes easier to apply the second set of thought cycles to, and so on. But it's actually much easier, especially for nonfiction, to just start by writing very small blogs repeatedly about topics that may be kind of related that could actually all add up to a book in total. And you'll actually learn which bits work and which bits don't. And that's how like Mark Manson got started. That's how like James Clear with Atomic Habits got started. They were all online writers who published regularly and worked out how to shape their writing and shape their voice to become a better writer and write a book that actually people wanted to read. And it didn't take them very long because they'd already written most of it already. By writing so regularly, I am already starting to feel like I've written like a whole series on kind of ego. If I felt like it, probably be reshaped into a book. Don't know if I'll actually do that, for example, but it's still like something that's actually quite easy for me to do now if I wanted to. Also, the fact that you're putting things out there and getting feedback is very motivating because of if you write 30,000 words of a book and don't publish it, no one ever sees it and you've still published nothing. Whereas if you write 30 blogs over 1,000 words, you've published all of those 30,000 words and you've got feedback on each different 1,000. And I've had some really nice pieces of feedback of saying how much they loved a specific bit that is just very motivating for me to go and write more things. So I would definitely focus on doing a smaller version of something that you can do repeatedly that will add up to a big journey rather than trying to bite off something giant all at once, because it's just not such a good strategy. And on the topic of having really good and big ideas, number 6 is ideas actually happen in the process of doing. And so don't let the big ideas block you. I've really concluded that trying to approach a big idea head on and repeatedly working it into something perfect gets super boring and just doesn't work that well. Having a diversity in approaches, the newsletter and then the podcast, and having smaller goals along the way to make it digestible is motivating and more successful. And you'll actually learn a lot from the things you do and get better at doing them. But firstly, you have to move forwards. But something that I think is really important is that you have to move forwards to be able to look backwards. People always say that hindsight is so powerful, but you can't have any hindsight without having the foresight to just start doing something. A few weeks ago, I spoke about the fact that your best ideas are actually just stepping stones to reaching your unmet potential and your even bigger ideas. Something so grand that you can't even imagine it right now because you've currently got your good ideas in the way, blocking you from these even better ideas. And this concept is just so powerful and so true. And what's funny was this idea only came to me whilst I was writing about a different idea in the podcast about the 5 different ways to finish your projects. My main idea was really just that you should start more of the things that you finish, and so you'll be doing more things. But whilst I was writing that, I actually had the realization that so many of the ideas that I have do just sit on the back burner because I want to do them properly. But whenever I start working on an idea and actually putting them out there in their non-perfect form, I end up having better ideas afterwards. And it's been so true with the writing that when I started, I had sort of 10 blogs or something that I wanted to do. And now that I've written 60, I've got 300 blogs that I've already got the ideas for that I need to work through. And just more and more ideas come and they get better and better the more that you do the thing. And so you maybe got a good idea for a song, but just make it and you'll have more ideas for better songs. You've got a good idea for a comedy sketch for TikTok, make it and you'll start having better ideas for comedy sketches. So if you can start throwing things out there and try and make some sense of them and just make them happen, you'll then start to have some hindsight and you'll also learn how to make things better. If you have a few funny jokes sometimes and you hope to become a comedian, you're not going to become a comedian. You have to spend a lot of time getting your ideas to the point of being useful to someone by putting them out there. Start with something that's small, raw, unpolished, but published. Only then can you start connecting the dots by looking backwards. As Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Just do stuff. And I think last time I gave the example about Mr. Beast that he started his YouTube channel when he was 13. And it wasn't until he was 17 and had been making videos every week where he had his first viral video as he was starting to learn the kind of things that people actually watch on YouTube. And he sat for 40 hours and counted to 100,000. By 24, he now has almost 200 million subscribers and is the biggest YouTuber on the planet. And he didn't start with his best work. He's been refining his craft, his ideas ever since he started. He just quickly gets ideas out there. Over time, he's built a framework for what works and then uses that to channel his creativity to make new things. His most successful video ever was actually pretty recent, where he recreated the Netflix TV show Squid Games. It was just a crazy idea with an epic budget and a huge risk of failure, but it's had 500 million views. And the 13-year-old Jimmy that first started doing YouTube could never have imagined something that big, let alone made it a reality. But he did have some ideas and he just started the ideas that he had, and those led to his bigger and bigger ideas. The importance was that he just got his ideas out there and cast his stepping stones to be able to move forwards. Built himself a platform for new ideas, so grand that only someone with such a platform can actually do something as big as the Squid Game idea. And with hindsight, it's easy for us to look at Mr. Beast and break down what he's done, but he was the one with the foresight to go and do something. So, whatever ideas you're having, just ride that idea train of yours. Don't get off at the first stop because you never know where your ideas could take you. And I truly hope that you do get to find out where your ideas lead by just making them and seeing what happens. Thank you so much for listening to the show today. If anything resonated with you and you think would be good for a friend, do please share it with them, because that's how we grow. And also, possibly, if you leave us a good rating or review, that would be super, super kind, and I would be really, really happy. And remember that life is to be enjoyed. That does start with enjoying today, because enjoying a life isn't like a future thing. It's a current thing to do now. So be kind to yourself, and whilst you're at it, be kind to someone else too.